So, okay, you're at the point where you've taken that UML model and you've mapped all that to the NIEM, and you know what all the things in the NIEM you're going to need are, and you know all the things you're going to create, and now it's time to actually make some schemas. Well, now the details of making the schemas and the subsets and all that, that's all part of the NIEM XML artifacts presentation, so that's a different presentation. We're just going to talk a little bit about creating schemas here in the context of IEPDs. So, some advice. Number one, at the very least, use a validating XML editor to make your XML, to make your schemas. I like to use NIEM schemas as templates. You a lot of times take them, strip out the middle, and you've got a nice template with the headers already in place. All the namespace stuff, all the imports already there, and that's always kind of nice. There are tools that generate XML schema, and sometimes they have NIEM support. So you can go and use some tools out there. They'll actually work with the NIEM, and they'll create some of the XML schema. But at the very least, make sure you're using a validating XML editor, because it'll catch mistakes, and it'll help make sure you don't make the mistakes in the first place. No matter how you make them, no matter how you do it, even if you do it by hand in a plain old text editor, you must follow the NIEM naming and design rules, the NDR. So you need to follow that at all times. Tools will help you do some of that, but in the end, the onus lies on you to make sure your work conforms to the NIEM. Here are a few tools to help you create schemas. Now note, I'm not giving an official endorsement to any of them, except for the very first one I'll mention because I wrote it, and so I like it. Some schema creation tools. Extension Wizard. It's a tool for building conformance schemas by selecting elements from drop-down lists. And you say, ooh, do I want to make a container? Do I want to make a string? Whatever. If you've watched the section 5 of 5 on Advanced Technical Concepts and seen the flowchart that you go through when trying to figure out what to extend, Extension Wizard basically incorporates that flowchart into a web-based interface to help you do that sort of stuff. So you can build NIEM conformance schemas automatically with it. It's good for small projects. It's not good for gigantic projects. It's really designed for small ones. GTRI, the Georgia Tech Research Institute, makes tools as well, and they make a lot of NIEM tools. They have a whole tool set to assist in many of the tasks involved in making IEPDs, including mapping, including schema generation, and including validation. So those are a good set of tools to look at as well. For more of a large integrated IDE sort of creation tool, take a look at the CAM tool. CAM stands for Content Assembly Management, and the tool will ingest XML schema, extract rules, extract structure and annotations, make schema, create test cases, and it's got NIEM built into it, so it does all these in a NIEM conformant fashion. It's a really great tool for doing a lot of sophisticated NIEM development. Now, the tools I've mentioned so far are all freely available. You can go and use them at no cost at all. The last tool is the IEPD Factory, and I hear good things about it. It's a NIEM modeling and mapping software tool, but it's built on top of the True Architect platform, which is an expensive platform. So IEPD Factory is not free to go use. I've heard good things, but I personally haven't shelled out the bucks to be able to take a look at it. So just know that's another tool out there, but unlike the other three, it's not freely available. Just a little more on tools to help you do stuff. One of the things you'll probably need to do when you make an IEPD and you're making your schemas is create code lists, because you're likely going to need a code table that isn't in the NIEM. Happens all the time. For short code lists, I always just copy an existing NIEM code table and change the values to suit my purposes. Just pick a nice small one and go and change the codes, change the values, and I've got my own code table. And it makes sure you do all the stuff right, that you have a simple type and a complex type with the right attributes added, all of that. It's just an easy way to make short ones. But what if you need to make a long code table? What if you got lots and lots of codes and you really don't want to sit typing them all in by hand? Well, the Georgia Tech Research Institute has the code list generation tool, which sucks in a spreadsheet and spits out XML schema in NIEM conformant form. So you basically have a spreadsheet of name value pairs, and you feed it to this tool, and what you get out the other end is an XML schema code list conformant with the NIEM. And in fact, you can do more than one code table per spreadsheet. Now, there is a format you have to follow to make sure that what you get out is what you want, but it's not a complex format, and there's help available with the tool to know what that format is. Highly recommended for doing longer code tables. Well, now let's talk about the next step. After you've built schemas, you're going to want to validate them. And actually, of course, like many things, this ends up being an iterative process. You create schemas, you validate them, you find out you got something wrong, you go back, you fix, you validate, and you go through until it all validates right. Now keep in mind, I'm not talking about validating instance documents against XML schema, although that's very important. I'm not glossing over that topic. It's just that topic belongs in other sections. What we're talking about here is validating your extension and exchange schemas and making sure your work is NIEM conformant. And then you'll validate instance documents against those schemas. But you want to check that the work you're doing in defining your exchange in schemas, that work is NIEM conformant. So how do you do that? There is an automated conformance validation tool, and it's called imaginatively the NIEM conformance validation tool. And what this tool does is you upload your schemas and your other IEPD artifacts to it, and it checks it against many of the NDR rules. It creates a report of problems that it finds. Now, it can't check everything because some things are dependent on human judgment. And a lot of times the problems it finds may just be potential problems, or they may be along the lines of, have you checked that X is correct in terms of a particular rule? So, it's not going to find every single problem, and some of them are going to be kind of things that just might go wrong, things you want to check. And it's all going to depend on you having some human judgment and looking at it. But what you get is a nice checklist of all the rules, which ones it checked, and what it found about each of these rules that it checked upon. And it's a really nice way to at least get a first shot at whether your work is conformant or not. Now note, it doesn't provide any certification of conformance. There's no guarantee here. It's a tool to help you check if your work is conformant, and it'll find a lot of errors. And basically it does the grunt work for you, but it's not going to find every one, and it can't really tell you that your work is completely NIEM conformant. Nobody can do that but a human expert. And that leads to the thorny topic of manual conformance validation. So how do you make sure your work is conformant? You've done the automated check, and maybe you've even used some of the tools I've talked about to help ensure that your work is conformant. Although even the best of tools, you can still make non-conformant stuff out of it if you've used them hard enough. So how do you do manual conformance? Well, you read the NDR and you understand the rules and you become an expert on XML schema in the NIEM. And then you carefully check your schemas for conformance. And you can do that. A lot of people do. It sounds like I'm making fun, but no, a lot of people do. They become expert enough that they can check their own work. Or an alternative is to hire an expert to review it for you. And there are plenty of NIEM experts out there. And in this economy, some of them need work probably too. So take a look. If you need somebody to review your work, there's probably somebody out there. Additionally, some communities provide conformance review services. Now, alas, if you're from the Children, Youth, and Family Services community, there aren't any conformance review services available for you. Some of the other communities, DHS, I believe, their communities have some conformance review services available. The CIFS domain isn't mature enough to really have that. Plus, there's always funding involved in that as well. These things don't come free. So if you're in the community for which this training material package is really pointed, the answer is, well, you probably don't have any community-based conformance review services available. But that doesn't mean they aren't out there for some of the other communities. And yes, you can hire me to do this kind of stuff too. Finally, a little licensing information about these materials. These materials are licensed under a Creative Commons license. What that means is that you can take these materials and distribute them yourself, or you can use them as a base for making derivative works. There are, however, two limitations involved. Limitation number one is that if you do distribute these works, you have to distribute them under a license identical to the one I'm showing you right now. And if you want more information about it, there's a URL on the screen. So if you distribute the works, you have to keep the Creative Commons license on them. The reason for that is that it ensures that other people can then take your work and do more stuff with it. These materials go back well over a decade in their original form, and they have been modified and enhanced throughout the years because this license protects the ability to do that. So it's very important. The second part of it is attribution. You need to give credit to the original authors of the work that you're using. So in this case, we're going to give credit to the various works that this work is based upon, and that's in the next slide. This particular work was funded by a grant from OJJDP, the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. They're based upon other prior works, partially work done by the Department of Homeland Security under their own grant, and partially under work done over the years by the IJS Institute, the National Center for State Courts, and the Georgia Tech Research Institute. These materials are a combination of all those prior works modified and enhanced for the Children, Youth, and Family Services community.